So every week I receive a lot of emails from you guys. And one of the most common questions that I see are about subwoofers. Namely, a lot of you would like to know what kind of sub is going to pair best to your stereo system. And while there's a lot of great subs on the market, usually my advice is, if you can afford it, buy a REL, and if you can, buy 2 of them. So it's only fitting that today I review the REL T7i subwoofer because this gives me an opportunity to explain why I constantly give out this advice. So with that said, let's roll the intro.
Here's what I like. Laying on the beach with sunlight in my eyes, laughing with my friends under the sky, following our hearts, so then we take a ride wherever. I always try to live my spirit.
Alright, so here it is, and as usual, before I talk about the performance, I'm going to briefly summarize what you get with the REL T7i subwoofer. And I think the best place to begin is to first go over what REL is attempting to achieve with their products, because once you understand their goals, it becomes easier to understand the rest of this review. So, in a nutshell, REL has been manufacturing subwoofers for many decades, and they're a company that's more about quality over quantity, because they realize that just about anybody can make a subwoofer that has a lot of boom. And with the advancement of today's driver tech, amplifier tech, DSP, and manufacturing, it's now possible to bring an affordable product to market that not only has a lot of boom, but at the same time can offer decent sound quality. But to them, decent isn't good enough. What they're looking for is the absolute best sound quality that you can possibly get out of a subwoofer. And it's not just about the low bass to them, it's also about what happens at the critical crossover point between your main speakers and the subwoofer. That's what they focus on, that's what they're really good at, and quite frankly, that's why audiophiles like me really like their products when it comes to 2-channel stereo listening applications. And that leads me to the REL T7i. So this is a part of their entry-level series. It's actually sandwiched right in the middle of the lineup, and even though it's an entry-level series, I mean, this is still a premium product that carries a price of $1,000, and when you look at it, it becomes clear as to where your money is going, because even though it's a compact subwoofer, the build quality, the fit and finish is done to an exceptional degree. It's almost like the Luxman of subwoofers. When you compare it directly to something like an SVS or say a SU sub, then it becomes immediately obvious that this is built to a slightly higher degree. The paint looks better. Instead of giving cheap plastic little feet, you get these metal pillars, and everything just feels just a little bit more solid and buttoned up. And that's going to lead me, of course, to the design itself. So what you're looking at is going to be a sub that has an 8-inch active woofer on the front with a 10-inch down-firing passive radiator on the bottom. So about the 8-inch woofer. This woofer took a long time to develop according to REL, and what they're going for is something that's rigid yet very light. And what they ended up with is a sub that has a true butyl rubber surround, which according to them should last many decades. We're also going to have this aircraft grade aluminum plug here in the center, or I should say the center cap, and the white material around that's actually going to be paper that hasn't been treated. It's a lot like triangle loudspeakers, because they found that once you treat the woofer, you add mass to it, that slows it down. So ultimately they decided to leave it plain, as you see right here. So anyways, guys, that's going to be it for the front of the woofer. Now let's take a look at the back. Actually, you know what, real quick, let me just lift this up so you can see the passive radiator. Hopefully you can see it. It's a pretty standard passive radiator. They wanted decent mass to that way it could actually have just a little bit more rigidity for that application. But anyways, guys, now let's take a look at the back. Alright, so here's the back of the T7i, and one of the first things that you guys will likely notice is the navy blue color on the back of the plate amp. Now, while this isn't a big deal because most of us aren't really going to notice it when the sub is in use, I nonetheless feel like it's a refreshing change from the sea of black plate amps that we normally get from most subwoofer manufacturers. Again, not a big deal, but it's just a nice touch. Anyways, let's talk about the kind of power that you get with this sub as well as the features. So, about the power, this sub uses a traditional Class AB amplifier that'll output 20 watts to the front 8-inch driver. Now, when it comes to features, up top we are going to have a port for REL's wireless system. Look, we're not going to go over that into any kind of detail because it's not relevant to this review. Next to that, we are going to have a phase switch that will adjust between 0 and 180 degrees. On the bottom, we are going to have an IEC inlet for our power cord, our on and off switch. Up top, we're going to have an LFE input, so for those of you who use AVRs, you can connect the sub that way. And if you want to use the sub to adjust the volume via LFE, you can do it right here. We have our crossover knob, so this is going to adjust between between 30 hertz and 180 hertz. We are down here going to have our low level input. So this is for those of you who have preamps or integrated amplifiers with dedicated preouts and you want to use this connectivity option. We also have our volume control for both the high and low level inputs. And this is going to lead me, to our high level input connection. So this is going to be, in my opinion, what makes REL so different from everybody else. So let me explain what I mean. First, this sub comes with this huge cable that I swear could wrap around the world at least a couple times. This connection right here goes to the back of the sub, and these speaker cables right here are literally just that. They're speaker cables. They connect to the back of the amplifier, the same amp that you use to plug your speakers into. And the whole point behind it, well, there's going to be a few things going on. Number one, REL feels like this is the purest signal possible to get to the subwoofer. And the best news is you don't need a dedicated pre-out. As long as your amplifier can use bare wire, you can connect the sub to that amp. But it's all about drinking from the same tap, because the signal that's going to leave your pre-out of whatever device it is you're using is going to be slightly different from the signal that's leaving your amplifier. So you're getting not only a more pure signal, but on top of that, there's going to be the circuitry inside. And this is something that REL doesn't really advertise all too well, which is the fact that every single subwoofer has a filter built in. This is to knock out unwanted high frequency information. The problem is these filters are delayed. They add a delay to the signal. Most of the time it's about 30 to 40 milliseconds. With subs that use DSP, it's about 100 milliseconds, but with REL, it's down to 8 milliseconds. And the whole goal is to make sure that the signal can pass to the subwoofer, through the circuitry, and ultimately to the drivers, or in this case driver, with as little alteration as possible. It's all about correct phase, speed, and making sure that the woofer is in tune with the speakers. And that's really going to be it, is what you're getting with the T7i is a compact, well-built subwoofer that's supposed to last a long time, look good in the room, and pair up well to your speakers. And that leads me finally to how it sounds. Okay, so when it comes to performance, guys, this section is going to be short and sweet because, let's face it, this is a subwoofer. It only has one job to do, which is to play low frequency information well. And as it relates to REL's goals, the T7i is a knockout because not only is it chock full of great sound quality, I mean, if you're somebody who's fanatical about your bass and you want a subwoofer that can effortlessly keep up with the most complex bass passages, this guy can do it with ease. But not only that, it's just easy to work with. You don't have to walk around your room trying to find the exact perfect place for the sub, and you don't have to spend hours or days or weeks trying to find that exact certain crossover point that's going to be perfect for your speakers. It took me next to no time to integrate this sub with pretty much every speaker that I tried with it. And that's going to be the beauty of the REL, and why I always recommend it to people, is because it does such a great job of keeping up with your main loudspeakers, and it sounds like it's the extension of your speakers, not like it has a separate tone or that there's always going to be just that little disconnect in sound between your speakers and the sub itself, allowing it to disappear and to just do its job, which is to supplement what you already own. In fact, that leads me to my experience with this subwoofer, because when it comes to sound, look, it's easy. It's quick, it has really good tone, it's explosively dynamic for something at this size. No, it's not going to provide this kind of rumble that's going to turn your insides into liquid or to rattle your doorknobs. It's going to be more about quality. But when it comes to the overall experience, let me say it like this. A good subwoofer isn't just about filling out the lower octaves. It can also impact the rest of the listening experience when done right. For example, the Usher SD500s that I just reviewed are great little speakers. They're spacious, they have lots of depth, they have really good top end, good tone within the mid-range, but they're compact and they have a lot of the weaknesses of a typical compact speaker. Just one subwoofer in my room, this little guy, not only filled out the lower bass, or I should say upper bass, and the rest of the bass, but it actually changed the very nature of that system. Now, instead of sounding like some posh and slightly bright sounding system, instead, the top end, even though it hasn't changed fundamentally, sounds just a little bit smoother with the rest of the frequencies now in place. That mid-range now sounds way fuller just because that sub is in place. So now a lot of the weaknesses that that little system had are no longer relevant. It's now full, it's now rich in tone, it now has that liveliness still, but it doesn't come across as quite as aggressive. And then of course you have the kind of bass that you would want, but it's still quick. It doesn't ruin the integrity of that speaker, which is all about speed with a slight amount of richness. for a sub to do that with next to no effort, that's why I like them so much. And it was the same story with the Harbeth P3 ESRs, the Buchardt S400s. Just a great match all the way around, and it doesn't just impact the bass, it can impact the rest of the experience. And when you do it right, it's something that you don't want to live without once you finally experience it. So yeah, it is a very good subwoofer. The last comment that I want to have is that it will work best in what I think are medium-sized rooms. It can also work in a small room, but if you're in a small room, you might have better luck with the T7i, which is going to be a more affordable and smaller version of this sub. If you're in a bigger room, then they have the T9i, which is going to be louder and able to fill a bigger space more easily. But still, it's not going to be a perfect sub, so let's talk about some of the imperfections now. Alright, so while this has been a very positive review, it's time to bring things back down to reality because I have 4 caveats that I need to go over with you guys. Starting with number 1, the most obvious. This is a compact subwoofer, and while it outputs a good amount of bass for its size, it's not going to deliver big subwoofer sound. So if that's what you're after, then you're going to want a different sub. Number 2, this is not an expensive sub by hi-fi standards, but it's nonetheless fairly pricey, meaning that there's going to be people out there who flat out can't afford it, which is a shame. And now let's move on to some of my more subjective and possibly even pedantic complaints, starting with this, the grill. Guys, I'm going to be honest with you. I cannot stand this grill for a couple reasons. Number 1, when you connect it to the sub, it doesn't even aesthetically match the rest of the subwoofer. I mean, the white really stands out, and it doesn't look like it was ever meant to be connected to this product. And I find that interesting because REL put so much time, effort, and energy into developing this all-around good product that it seems like this grill is an afterthought. I mean, the shape is boring, the overall construction is good, but again, there's just nothing about it that matches the subwoofer. In fact, the only good thing is that there's no logo on it. In fact, that leads me to the second subjective and pedantic complaint, which is the branding. Look, it's okay to have your brand name on the driver. Most companies do it. The brand on the back of the plate amp, sure, everyone does that too. But REL took it to another level. On the top here, you're going to have a metal plate with the REL brand logo on it. Then on the feet, we have REL not just on one side of the pillar, but we have it on 2 sides of the pillar. That way, no matter where you're looking at the sub from, you're going to know that it's a REL. And I think it's just a little bit too much. Sometimes less is more. Anyways, guys, that's just it for the caveats. Now, usually this is when I say, hey, let's wrap up this review, but I have something special for you. What I'm going to do in the next section is I'm going to take our T7i and compare it to another very popular competitor who is offering a product at the same exact price point. So, let's get to it. Okay guys, so I'm going handheld for this section, and what you're looking at right here are 2 $1,000 subs from very respected companies in the business. To the left we have the SVS SB3000, and to the right we have our REL T7i. And guys, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time here because just look at the difference between these subs. The physical difference is right in line with the performance difference between them. So first, let's start off with the SVS. It uses this giant 13-inch driver, which is hilariously almost as big as the front baffle of the REL. And this sub was meant to be indestructible. In fact, that's part of SVS's literature, is that they challenge you to break the sub. Compared to the REL, it's going to hit harder, dig lower, and it's going to output a whole lot more bass, while at the same time being pretty good for music. I mean, it's a really good jack-of-all-trades solution. Over here with the REL, we're going to get performance that's going to be notably better for music. It's going to be quicker, it's going to be far easier to integrate with most loudspeakers, and believe it or not, guys, it's going to be the punchier sounding sub. While the REL has more of that gluttural bass output, this has more of a dynamic and quick tone to it. And don't forget that this has a passive radiator on the bottom, which means there's more radiating surface area than what you see in front of you. So both subs are going to be very good, but very different. If you're confused as to which to buy, well, I hate to encourage this kind of behavior, but you may have to bust out the credit card, try both, and return to one that doesn't work for you. Anyways, guys, that's going to be it for the comparison, and now let's wrap this up. Okay, so my objective conclusion is going to be pretty short and sweet. The REL T7i is a compact, well-built subwoofer that should last for a very long time, but moreover, it's going to appeal towards people who are fanatical about bass quality. If you're looking for a solution that's easy to work with and for something that's going to sound like a natural extension of your loudspeakers, at least when you set it up right, then you need to check out this subwoofer. Now clearly, it's not going to appeal to everybody. If you're looking for that big subwoofer sound, then you need to upgrade to either the T9i within their lineup, or you need to go with a different sub altogether. And that leads me to my subjective thoughts. So clearly, I like this subwoofer. In fact, I'm actually considering it for myself, at least with my desktop system. But let's not go around pretending like REL is the only company that makes good subwoofers for music. There are tons of subs that I haven't heard, and of the ones that I have heard, another competitor would be a direct servo open baffle subwoofer. That's where you get really good sound quality and you get that visceral power, but as always, there are compromises. And in that case, it's very big, and it doesn't exactly look all too great in most rooms. So again, you have to pick and choose what's important to you. So to wrap this whole thing up, I'm going to share some experiences that I've had with other REL products. So I used to own the REL T7 or T3 subwoofer, and this was a compact little guy that had great tone to it. It was easy to integrate in with little monitor speakers, but God, it had no power whatsoever. I then switched over to the T5, and the T5 almost had the opposite problem. It had actually pretty good amount of power for its size, but it had more difficulties integrating it with normal loudspeakers. And that fast forwards me to the T7i, which I think is hands down better than both in every way. It's quicker, it's easier to integrate in with a lot of different loudspeakers, and it has a lot more power than both of them. So I think the T7i is an exceptionally well-rounded product. I think REL did a great job with them, and that wraps up my thoughts on this subwoofer. As always, guys, I appreciate you checking in, and until next time, peace.